Our next speaker and the first speaker of the Building Companies block is a friend of mine. He was also one of the first 50 people in the Slack channel that we set up. For those of you that may or may not have noticed, I'm wearing Slack socks today, just to celebrate that. He's also looking for the best ramen in town. He's always on a mission, and it's never good enough. So if you know a great ramen place, definitely talk to him. He's also the co-founder of Fusion. They make really amazing Unix software. Ladies and gentlemen, Ning!
So thank you so much, Justin, for that awesome introduction. And definitely, if you have recommendations for ramen, please find me after this talk, or better yet, buy me ramen after this talk. That would be great. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So like Justin already mentioned, I'm Ning. I'm the co-founder of Fusion, and Fusion is a software company that creates awesome Unix server tools to power the modern web. Just out of curiosity, are there any people in the room here that are familiar with Fusion, by any chance? Fuck yeah. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. So our story. So basically about 8 years ago, my co-founder, Hong Lee, who's somewhere in this audience as well. Hong Lee, could you take a stand? Yay, for Hong Lee. So Hong Lee and myself, 8 years ago, we were pretty poor students, and we had about $500 basically in savings. And I think we hardly had any money basically to buy books as well. But despite that, we thought it was going to be a really cool idea to start a company. And so we did, and through some magic or some miracle, we managed to go from $500 in savings to basically bootstrapping a company that does over $1 million in annual recurring revenue, all without taking VC money. So why am I standing here? I hope that I'm able to inspire you to do the same, because in the media you often read stories about companies raising $10 million or even $100 million, and I think it's just this absurd kind of thing that people are celebrating VC funding. I mean, it's like celebrating having a mortgage in a similar way, because rather than putting up your house up for collateral, you're actually putting up a part of your company up for collateral, right? Can I get an amen on that, by the way? Yeah, thank you. So rather than writing about this on, for example, like the Next Web, I really wanted to talk about this because it's a subject that's really near and dear to my heart, and I really hope that you guys walk away with this same feeling of trying to do something that is out of the ordinary. So initially, I wanted to call this talk "Startup Chose to Bootstrap," and you won't believe what happened next to catch your attention. But after talking it over with Justin, he thought it would be a better idea to also reflect on the things concerning VCs. So my experiences with VCs. And even though I didn't choose to take VC money, that doesn't mean that I didn't at some point in time consider it, because I think everybody here would be interested in hearing these magical stories about raising $10 million, and I would be lying if I wouldn't want to be one of those people at some point in time. But there's also kind of a thing that I do feel obligated to tell you as well. When it comes to building a successful business or anything, I really have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to that. And to be honest, I think anybody who claims that they do know what they're doing when it comes to building a successful startup is full of shit. And why do I think this? Well, I think that things like luck and circumstance are much more important than knowledge, actually. Knowledge is a part of the equation as well, but luck and circumstances are, in my opinion, much more important. I mean, if it's just a matter of knowledge anyway, you could have probably bought a book about how to build a successful business, and you'd have successful businesses everywhere, right? Like left and right, and suddenly I'm Oprah. Look underneath your chair, there's a successful startup there. That doesn't make any sense, I think. So the factor of luck and coincidence plays a major part in that as well. So, with that out of the way, let's actually get into the meat of the talk. So, my talk is called VC Money or Bootstrapping. And I think that's a question that probably most of the founders in this room have probably wondered themselves, right? Can I get a show of hands for people that actually considered VC money at some point? All right, and people that are principally, stuck to bootstrapping by any chance? Well, it's pretty 50-50 here, so it's going to be really interesting. And my talk basically here is going to be a tale of trade-offs and soul searching, because for us as well, it was a trade-off. And our our soul searching also played a part in that as well. But before we are able to answer this question, we first need to understand how VC money works. So why do VCs actually invest in startups? So I've been in a privileged position that I've actually gotten to talk to a lot of VCs during my career. And the numerous VCs that I've spoken usually give these kinds of answers. And to be really honest, this is usually just blah, 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 get a big return on investment. This is probably the most important part, right? Like everything that they do leads up to this. And to understand how they get this really big return on investment, it's really important for you guys to understand as well how the VC game is being played. So right here, I've made a really cool paint diagram consisting of your traditional VC firm, which is led by general partners. And on the right-hand side, you see some hopeful startups, like an Uber clone, an Airbnb clone, Facebook clone, and some new startup. I know some of you here are an Uber clone or Airbnb clone. Please come talk to me after. I'm really hoping that I'm able to persuade you into doing something different. But yeah, I'm digressing here. So you have these Uber clones, these Airbnb clones, et cetera, and they think that in order for their startup to succeed, they need capital, right? So they go to this VC firm, they've written this pitch deck, and this VC firm probably gets like a million gazillion of these kinds of pitch decks every day. So from all these pitch decks, they select a few that they think are worth investing in, and they want to put money in. But where do they get that kind of money from, right? Like a VC firm needs to have money as well to be able to fund these kinds of things. So that's basically the interesting part. In that sense, a VC firm is very much like a startup as well. Like they need to raise funds in that sense. And in this case, a VC firm, or rather the general partners, the boss mans basically of the VC firm, basically raise funds from limited partners. And limited partners are things like pension funds, university endowments, insurance companies, basically parties that have a lot of money that they rather invest in things that have a quicker return on investment, a larger return on investment, rather than just putting it on the bank. And I think you guys can probably tell from personal experience that your personal savings account interest is probably close to zero, right? Like if you find anything that's higher than zero, please find me after this talk as well. Because my bank is like 0.01% at this point per year, which is ridiculously stupid low. So once the general partners basically convinced the limited partners to invest in their VC firm, that's when a VC firm has money. And these VC firms will then decide which startups they invest in. So for example, they might like the Uber clone, they might like the Airbnb clone, might not really like the Facebook clone, but they definitely like this new startup idea as well. So basically, with the money, they spent this in these various startups. And they might like the Uber clone more, for example, than the Airbnb clone. Of course, this service is not for free, so they also keep a small fee as well, and that remains in the VC firm to pay off staff and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forward a few years later, and surprise, surprise, a few startups don't survive. This is a fact of life. In fact, 90% of startups do not survive after 5 years. I kind of made that up, but you get the idea. A lot of them die. Just remember that. But yeah, so miraculously, there's this one startup, this new startup that for some reason does survive. And not only does it survive, it's actually thriving, right? It's heading towards unicorn status. And this is the time that a VC firm might be scratching itself behind the ear and thinking, hey, how can I bank on this? How can I make money on my investment? And this is basically when they start thinking about selling their shares. And this can be done through either an IPO or finding a larger company that might want to buy up like a competitor, right? So this is basically the part where the VC firm sells their initial stock, which is now worth a lot more, as you can see by the many, many dollar signs that I drew up there. And basically, the VC firm gets many, many dollar signs added to it. But we can't forget, of course, that this was only possible because of the involvement of the limited partners. So, obviously, some of this profit needs to flow back to the limited partners. And usually, this is about 80%, and the rest remains at the VC firm as a fee/bonus. So that's how VCs work. And as you can see from this diagram, VC firms have stakeholders as clients, right? Like these limited partners are basically their clients. So they use their money to make even more money. And This is really important to understand because this basically means that VC firms, like their primary concern is to look out for their stakeholders first. Very much so, like a founder looks out for their customers first. This, however, might not always gel well. Like the interests of the founder and the VC might actually conflict here. And to understand why this might be the case, it's, again, important to ask another question. Why do founders actually start a company? So if I were to just arbitrate, are there any founders here by any chance? Could some of you raise your hands? Yeah, I'm not going to do you, Steven. I already know what you're going to say. You, sir, over there. Can I ask you why you founded a startup? I know, that's why I asked now. So basically being your own boss, right? And creating things like potentially impacting the world or something in some positive way? Okay, not that much. Right. just not for me. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So positively impacting the world. Oh, that's great. And of course, probably making money, right? Like, that's also important. So wow, surprise, surprise. Why start your own company, right? Like, most of the people that I ask this question usually say, like, be your own boss, change the world, and of course, being able to pay the bills. But what happens when you add a VC to this? Well, suddenly, I don't think the first point really holds anymore because you sold a part of your company. So right now, the VC is also a boss man. Sorry if I'm talking too street for you guys, but you get the idea, right? Now you're suddenly also working for your VC rather than just for yourself. As for changing the world, well, only if it has enough return on investment, right? Like, can't be a philanthropy over here. And as for making revenues or making money, well, that might not always be the case. Like, a VC might have a different KPI when it comes to success. For example, eyeballs that at some point in time, are convertible into money. So you have to wonder, is $1 of VC money worth like $100 in terms of like soul currency? Because you're giving up some freedoms here that you need to take into consideration as well. You can only do your life once, and usually people start their companies in their 20s or 30s. I mean, I think most of you lovely people here are between 20 and 30, 40-ish. Yeah, very young at mind. And basically, you can only do this once, so you really need to think about how you spend your time. For me, I thought this was not worth it. I thought like my 20s and my 30s are the most beautiful times of my life, and I should spend them however the fuck I want, basically. And that's where Bootstrap comes into play. And this is something that Jason Fried, from Basecamp and 37 Signals, basically tells people a lot. Like $1, that you made in profits through bootstrapping is basically $1 of no money. Let's just put it that way. And what I mean with this, and it's very funny that Steven used the same slide, but in a very similar context, I think. I think we're very much akin when it comes to these kinds of thoughts, is that VCs can make some really weird demands. And to make it even more personal, I was actually planning on flying out to meet Steven like 3 years ago. I'm not sure if he still remembers, but he had to cancel the very last moment because he had a VC meeting, guys. And he couldn't even meet a friend, a bro. And, I mean, well, no, but that kind of defines it, right? Like, you have to prioritize a few things. Whereas if I'm bootstrapped, I can basically just say, nope, no. So another important lesson, I think, with regards to bootstrapping is that it teaches you how to make money. And this is another important lesson I feel that that Jason Fried over at Basecamp and 37 Signals advocates in a well manner. Because, when you bootstrap, you have $0, right? You have to make money from day one, or otherwise you won't be able to make rent. Whereas VC funding, on the other hand, might teach you some wrong patterns. And I'm saying might here because I think Steven is a brilliant guy and he does not fall in this category, but it tends to teach you some wrong patterns in terms of like spending money because you have a lot of money. And to be honest, if you were to put $5 million on my bank account, I'd be making it rain all day, basically. Ramen for the rest of my life, basically. And if you don't believe these kinds of headlines, then just look at the numbers. So this is an analysis basically that Quartz did on 200 startups that failed. And from the funded startups, you can see that the number one reason is basically that they ran out of cash. Compare that to the bootstrappers that failed, 40 in this case. then you see that this is reason number 10. And at the top, just like the previous one, you see that the business model was not viable. And that's the same over here. So to figure out a business model, I don't think you need that much VC funding anyway. Well, depending on the start that you do, right? Like in the case of Staven, for example, when hardware is involved, that's definitely a different story, I think. In that case, I do believe you need to raise funds. Also, and before you laugh, I think this is very important and it's a very serious matter. I also think that by bootstrapping, you remain grounded. You don't make silly remarks like this. Is the audio on by any chance? All right, so guys, enjoy.
It has not been easy for me. And, I started off in Brooklyn. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. My father gave me a small loan of $1 million. It has not been easy for me. And my father gave me a small loan of $1 million. I came into...
This is basically my response every time I see some stupid-ass company go belly up when they had like 5 or 10 million in funding. I simply don't understand how you could go through something like that. But feel free to come talk to me after this talk if you have experience in that. I would love to learn how to spend money like that. But regardless of VC or bootstrapping, I think we all have one thing in common. We don't want to fail, right? So how does success, what does success look like then? Well, some might think it looks like this. This was actually made by one of our employees, Nick. If you see this, Nick, I love you. But on a more serious note, after more contemplating, I think success looks more like this. And if you don't mind, I would love to read this for you. So basically, success is to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people, to earn the appreciation of honest critics, and to endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, like Scarlett, to find the best in others, probably also like Scarlett, to leave the world a little bit better, to even know one life has breathed easier because you have lived. And I find this one the most important one. This is to have succeeded. And this was written by Ralph Waldo Emerson. And before you think I've read anything more than this, then you're totally wrong. I found this on Reddit. I loved it, though. But the point with regards to finding success by making somebody's life better, right? So in my case, I think we succeeded because our product powers over 500,000 sites, including companies, hospitals, universities, but also charities like Kiva. And for those unfamiliar with Kiva, Kiva is basically a charity that provides microloans to people in third world countries that want to start their own business rather than just giving them money and hoping that they will survive. So rather than basically giving a starving person food, they teach them how to catch their dinner, for example. Figuratively speaking, of course. Unless it's really a fishery, then it's literally, never mind. So, the too long, didn't pay attention version of this talk basically is bootstrap if you can, at least once in your life. I think the experience is invaluable to you, and you definitely understand how to make money, and you understand what it's like to start from zero. And raise funds if you must. So there's certain, like I mentioned, there are certain companies that require funding, like you can't do this bootstrap. Companies that require upfront investments, like Karma, for example, for hardware. Yeah, at least I think so. And that's basically my talk. So follow us. Follow me on ning_NL if you like my talk. Follow Hong Li Lai if you liked his standing up technique. And follow us on Fusion NL if you like our products. And that's basically it.
Thank you so much, Ning. So Ning will be removed from his headset right now, and then he'll be going over to the speakers lounge, and he has asked everybody that joins him in the speakers lounge to not tweet or record what they're going to chat about. Basically, you can get his brutally honest opinion on absolutely anything as long as you don't tell anybody else that's been in that room. Kind of like Fight Club rules type of deal.